Hi, this is Paul Acevedo of WP Central, here with a video review of the PowerA mini-series controller for Xbox One. This comes from the same company that makes the Moga controllers for mobile platforms. The mini-series controller is a wired USB controller, so it has the advantage of not requiring batteries. It plugs directly into your console via USB cable. The cable itself has breakaway connector, just like wired Xbox 360 controllers. It is 3 meters in length, that's 9.8 feet, which is quite a good length. Of course, you know the Xbox One controllers can be used as wired controllers if you plug in a micro USB cable, but it's not going to be quite the same experience not having it built in, and you might not even own as long a cable. The real advantage of the mini-series controller compared to a regular controller is that it's smaller. It is designed to be comfortable for small hands to hold, but that doesn't mean it's too small for an adult to use. As you can see, my hands look a little big on it, but everything is of appropriate size. The sticks are ever so slightly smaller than those of an Xbox One controller. Let's see, looks about 1 or 2 millimeters less wide, but they perform excellently. Like, you're probably used to third-party analog sticks not being that great, but PowerA actually knows how to make good analog sticks, and so they perform really well. The face buttons are quite clearly smaller, and again, they're not too small at all for me with kind of normal, maybe slightly big hands, but if your hands are real big, maybe they'd be too small. The guide button, the home button, is in a different position, pretty comfortable position, and it's smaller too. Feels a lot different to press because it's mostly sticking out and you can feel kind of the rubber button inside just below the surface when you push it. Select and start buttons, easy to press. You are not going to accidentally press them during gameplay. Well, start's a little bit close to the X button, but not unreasonably so. The D-pad is an important part, and it might look a little small, but it is not as small as the Gamecube's D-pad. So here, the Nintendo Gamecube, the controller itself is not actually any smaller than an Xbox One controller, really, or just barely so. But the D-pad is tiny. Nintendo loves to make these tiny little child-sized D-pads. This D-pad is not great for fighting games. On the other hand, this D-pad, very responsive. It is probably about 1 millimeter or 2 smaller than the official Xbox One D-pad, just like the sticks. But it performs really well. Like, it clicks right in with those directions. You're not accidentally going to hit diagonals when you don't want to. And I played Killer Instinct with it and had no trouble performing special moves, so that was really appreciated. Triggers and bumpers are where this controller has some significant differences from the official Microsoft controller. You can see the bumpers are more distinct buttons compared to these. They are clickier, and I actually think they feel a lot better than the official Xbox One bumper buttons. I am a critic of these bumpers. People who mostly play first-person shooters are not going to notice any problems with these, but if you try to use them in fighting games and stuff, you'll find they're just not as responsive as they should be. These bumpers, on the other hand, are much better, very precise, easy to press. I really like them. As you can see, the triggers are much smaller. They don't have the gun trigger-like curve, and they just don't have a lot of give before they are completely pressed. Like, you're not going to be doing fancy analog maneuvers with these triggers. Basically, you can push them like a little bit in or all the way. You know, you're not getting the full range of movement that you would from larger and better triggers like this. But I mean, they are appropriate for the size of the controller, and that's understandable. Then you have vibration. That's also a concern. The vibration motors in the mini-series controller, you can feel them when things vibrate, but I would say they are weaker than the official controller's motors. Like when you're playing Forza, you might feel some light vibrations just as you're driving, and then you'd feel stronger ones when you actually collide with things. The low-range vibration just isn't much there with the mini-series controller. Again, it sort of makes sense that there would be smaller motors inside of the controller, but it's slightly less satisfying when playing a game that really makes great use of the vibration function like Forza does. And then there is one major flaw with this controller, and that is there is no headset jack, unfortunately. So playing online games with this controller is probably not a great idea. You don't want to use your Kinect for chat. That's a really lame thing to do to your fellow online players. So you're pretty much going to be silent, unless you're playing Warframe, which supports a keyboard at least. Still, the mini-series controller only costs $39.99 compared to $59.99 with an official controller. So I guess that is something they couldn't squeeze in with the current price range and user base of the Xbox One. Hopefully, PowerA will follow up with a model that does have a headset jack later in the console's life. So in summary, the advantages of this controller are the size is actually quite comfortable for kids or most adults. So if you like a smaller controller, it's easily the controller to buy just for that alone, I think. The D-pad is really good. It is perfectly appropriate for fighting games, just like the official Xbox One D-pad. The buttons are smaller, but still perfectly responsive. The analog sticks are great. You have superior bumper buttons to the Xbox One controllers. And then you have weaker triggers with less movement range, which could affect your performance in games that really make strong use of those things, but most of the time wouldn't be a problem. I played several games with this, including Forza Horizon 2. I never felt like the controller was holding me back. It always felt good to hold. The mini-series controller is a really unique controller, and I enjoy it. Be sure to read our full review at wpcentral.com.